The Cowboys have a lot of work to do on defense this offseason. We'll tell you if they can get it done and become a Super Bowl contender next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets all season long. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is Landon McCool. And on today's show, we are answering your Twitter questions. And we got some really good ones. And this first one is from Mario. He wants to know, with the Cowboys only having 2 picks in the first 3 rounds, those 2 first-round picks, do we think they have enough assets to rebuild this defense into a Super Bowl contender in one offseason? Or do they need to prioritize some positions in free agency that maybe have a longer learning curve? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think they do. I mean, look, I think it's rebuilding the defense is a comprehensive plan. It's not as simple or cut and dry as just nailing those 2 first-round picks and adding 2 great defensive players to your roster. It's about doing that plus getting incremental improvement from some of these other players that you have on your roster, plus having a healthier DeMarvion Overshown going into the season, plus maybe a new defensive play caller or new defensive coaching to kind of help get more out of your players. Like it needs to be a combination of things that are all going to be working together to kind of get the level of improvement that you need. But yeah, I do think they have the assets in place that they need to kind of get it done. And I think that, the draft picks combined with, hopefully a little bit of free agent spending that they should be able to carve out with some trigger pulls of the contract. I think that they should be able to do what they need to do to get where they need to go to be a better defense to go to the Super Bowl. Now the question is, are they going to do other things that they need to do? That's a much more difficult question.
All right, I want to get to the second part of that question because I think it's a really good one. Should the Cowboys prioritize in free agency positions that do have a little bit longer of a learning curve? Because I'm looking at like the cornerback position. I think you and I are in agreement that they probably need one more cornerback, right? You have Deron Bland, you have Ravel. We'll see about Kalen Carson, what he looks like in year 3. Trevon Diggs probably not going to be on this roster next year unless a lot of making up happens. They need another cornerback. But we know how tricky it can be to draft these guys in round 1 and have them play. Are they better off just, saving $10-15 million in free agency for a starter and then using that pick for a different position?
They might be, I think it's a good thought because again, we haven't gotten into our draft prep yet, but I obviously I know we have, but we haven't discussed it on the show. And I think that, you and I have dipped our toe into it enough to know that there aren't a ton of kind of first round corners that are going to make Will McClay sing the way that he needs to. And
the top corner is coming off an ACL injury and did not play a snap this year, which is
terrible. Well, he did get a Senior Bowl invite though, didn't he? And that's going to be interesting to see if he goes up and plays there. That's going to be worth watching. But anyways, I think that you look at the other guys that are kind of coming out, the LSU kid, a couple of the other guys, the Terrell's little brother, they're all a little bit undersized, right? So I don't know if Will's willing to bend on there and potentially draft these guys. But even if he's not, I think the point still stands that like it probably is a better route if you have to kind of find a way to cobble together the different strategies to get the talent you need. I think the better route is probably to go with the known quantity with cornerback because you do have 2 guys that you like. I think if you could just get another, better than just starting quality level cornerback in here, I think a lot of the other pieces kind of can fall into place a little bit. You're going to get Butler back. You're going to you still have Kalen Carson. And I think those guys can be better depth pieces if you're able to find someone who can come in as your second or third cornerback. Maybe it's easier to go a nickel route and go get a guy that's a really solid nickel player. Might be cheaper and you'll get more bang for your buck that if you don't want to necessarily keep Deron Bland in there. But if you want to play Bland, you can also easily go out and get a guy that's maybe more of a boundary type and kick Bland inside there. So you do have some options, but I do think it makes some sense to go the veteran route for the cornerback position.
All right. So how many defensive players do you think the Cowboys need to turn this unit into let's just call it like a playoff caliber defense? I know that's a little bit vague, but right now they obviously don't have that. So looking forward to next year, how many guys do you think they need?
I think that, all right, well, let's just do some simple math, right? I think they need a starting defensive end, one starting defensive end, right? I think they need one starting linebacker, right? Okay. I think that they need two defensive back starters of some form or fashion. I think you can mix and match there, but I think maybe a safety probably in there as well, and at least one corner. So what's that, 4? And then that's probably 4. You're going to need another 2 guys to kind of show themselves as reliable, quality, rotational defensive player pieces at probably a defensive end and linebacker as well.
Okay. And that's 6. That's honestly the exact same number I had. So the way that I'm looking at it is you've got 2 first-round picks. We're saving those first-round picks for defense, not offensive tackles. I'm sorry, everybody. So saving those for defense, right? So let's cross off 2 of those, right? For 2 first-round picks on defense. I think you can get 2 mercenaries like you got this year with like Dante Fowler and Jadeveon Clowney, guys that are going to cost between $2 and $6 million a year. I think Fowler was 1 year, $6 million. Clowney was 1 year, $2.5 million. Those guys are actually pretty easy to find. I think you'll be okay there. And that comes down to you need probably 2, quality guys in free agency, somewhere between the $6 and $10 million range. And I do think they have enough assets. They're going to have the cap space. They can manipulate the cap however they want to do it. It's going to be tight. You're going to have to be really good at nailing down the right players for the scheme. And honestly, that might be the most important part. It's getting the right coach in here to coach these guys up. But you need 6 defenders. I think you can realistically get them.
Yeah. And to be clear, I think that it's probably 4 starters, right? And then 2 guys that are like starter, like Solomon Thomas level players that are not borderline starters, right?
Well, I think Fowler's a perfect example.
Yeah,
Fowler, I don't know if Fowler's technically starting right now, but he's giving you good snaps off the edge. You're going to probably need to replace Fowler this offseason. I think you can do that fairly easy.
Yeah, and I think Fowler is a good example of how you did it. Clowney's honestly a good example of how you did it, right? Able to get him basically mid-season, and it took a little while for him to get up and going, but those kind of guys are available, right? So, I do think the Cowboys have the assets required to kind of get this done. That's why we're not panicking about this, because it does feel like a solid offseason worth of work, but definitely an offseason and not 2.
Yeah.
So I think it certainly could be done. We see this kind of turnover happen all the time anyways.
Yeah, there's a lot of teams that are able to honestly, Philadelphia is a really good example of this. Was it 2024? They drafted Quinyon Mitchell in the 20s. They drafted Cooper DeJean in round 2. And just those 2 picks alone really transformed their defense. It gave them some youth in the secondary, and that completely changed that unit. Now that they had some really good drafts, obviously, as well. You can do it. The margins are going to be razor thin, but I don't think we're going into this offseason feeling like they just don't have the resources to get it done. I think they can. And honestly, I think they're going to get at least 4 of those 6. We'll see if they're able to get the last 2.
Yeah, and again, there's always talent acquisitions 365 days a year, so there's still going to be plenty of time, even if we get into the training camp situation, even if we get into the early part of the season, to kind of course correct things a little bit if you don't get it all done.
All right, let's talk about the Cowboys' recent history of contract extensions, because they've not had a lot of success there. What is going on? We'll try to break it down next. This episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Do you ever feel like your money just disappears each month? It happens fast. A few subscriptions here, an impulse buy there, and suddenly the numbers in your bank account don't match the numbers in your head. But Rocket Money helps you get clarity. It'll help you track every dollar and stay in control of your finances, because managing your money shouldn't feel like a second job. And Rocket Money does the heavy lifting for you so that you can save more and stress less. Rocket Money finds subscriptions that you forgot that you were paying and helps you clean them up quickly. And seeing all your spending on one dashboard makes it easier to understand where your money is going. I actually had a subscription today that I didn't know I was still paying. It was $25 a month. Rocket Money helped me find it and get rid of it. It's so easy to save money with Rocket Money. I cannot emphasize that enough. So take control of your finances and cancel your unwanted subscriptions with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That is rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. You already live the Dallas Cowboys every day. Why don't you take it up another level and go ad-free for the Locked On Cowboys podcast? Join the Everydayer Club and you'll get our show with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and so much more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedoncowboys.supercast.com or check out the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, we had a really good question from Jesse. He wants to know, why do the Cowboys have so many problems when after signing some players to big contract extensions? I want to run through a couple of them over the last couple of years. Now, again, this is not the entire list, but this is just a couple of these. So 2020, they gave Amari Cooper a 5-year deal worth $100 million. He was traded after the 2021 season, so 2 years on his new deal. Michael Gallup, 5 years, $62 million in 2022. He was released after the 2023 season. Trevon Diggs got a brand new deal in 2022. He's going to be gone after the 2025 season. I don't know if I'm breaking news here or anything, but don't think he's going to be back. That doesn't mention contracts like Terrence Steele, Jalen Smith, Ezekiel Elliott, Dalton Schultz, all that aged very poorly. What do you think is going on here?
Well, I think part of it is some of those players have played poorly, and frankly, like I don't know that a couple of those contracts, I don't know if I blame the Joneses for that necessarily. I think a couple of them I do. Trevon Diggs, like I think that one was a little bit scary, but again, just because of the type of player he was, but the production kind of almost dictated that one, right? I think the Terrence Steele one, I think some of that has been injury, some of that has been bad play, but I look back at the Gallup one and some of the ones like that where you signed the guy and you felt good about the contract at the time, and just the player ended up just having a series of injuries that kind of derailed them. And then
I think the thing with the Gallup one though, they signed Gallup after the 2021.
Oh, that's injury. Right. Well, maybe he's a bad example because I do think.
But you're not wrong overall, because like Trevon Diggs, they signed him in 2022. In 2023, he tears his ACL, and he's just had problems ever since then. Because even in 2022, the first year after signing Trevon, he didn't have all the interceptions, but I actually thought he was a more consistent player. So some of this is injury luck. Terrence Steele was a good example. Sure. He got hurt, I think, the year after they signed him to a contract extension.
And then that affected his play too, as well. And so it's like, it's hard to kind of blame him a little bit with that, especially since he's played fine at times. And in fact, he's played pretty well recently, but you're right. It's hard not to look back at that contract, kind of overall and say, man, the Cowboys didn't really get great value on those contracts. And I think look, it's also had an effect on Jerry, right? And how they're kind of reluctant to pay these sort of deals, because I have to believe that they have to look at some of these situations, and some of them are their own fault. Like obviously the Jalen Smith one was ridiculous because of his situation. Some of these are being done kind of, as knee-jerk reaction. I think, we may look back at the Ferguson situation.
That's exactly the Jake Ferguson and Deron Bland. I think Bland less so, but both of those guys, it seemed like they signed because they wanted to put some pressure on Micah Parsons.
I think, to me, the Bland situation, I think Bland's a good player. I just have a hard time feeling mad about that one. The Ferguson one, like, it feels like is kind of done more from the heart at this point, because it does feel like we've gotten really kind of inconsistent play. We've been waiting for him to kind of get back to a place where he was even 2 years ago, and it just hasn't happened. And in fact, he's had another kind of really up and down year. So I don't know. Some of these I certainly lay at the feet of the Joneses. Like, at the time the signing what happened, I was scratching my head, but I also think that there is a healthy portion of these where they've finally kind of gotten on the bad side of injury luck and that sort of thing. And some of these guys get derailed like almost right after they sign their contract.
Well, I'm going to go back more than a decade now, but they signed Des Bryant after that really magical 2014 season. And then in week 1 in 2015, he breaks his foot and he has a Jones fracture. And it just, from that point on, Des was really never the same player. And it makes sense. That's a major injury to an explosive athlete. Some of it is just really bad luck, but there is part of it where I think sometimes they sign too many players that are of like the B quality. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm a big fan of Osa Odigizua. You know this, right? We've been fans of Osa for a long time, but they got into a situation this offseason where their defensive tackle room was so bad that they had no choice but to pay Osa market value. Now, I don't think they're overpaying Osa really by any stretch, but you're also paying him $22 million a year. And I think if you didn't make that move, I think it's a little bit easier to keep Micah Parsons around. And I think they've gotten into situations like that with Terrence Steele, with Jake Ferguson, with Osa Odigizua, where they're paying a lot of B caliber players, not A caliber money, but just a lot of these guys. That's kind of takes up the middle of your roster.
I look at the Osa thing a little differently. I think the mistake with the Osa contract was trading Micah Parsons, because to me, 100%. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
you pair those two together and they're awesome together. 100%.
And I think that's the thing, is that you were paying Osa for the production that he had given you and that you felt like you were going to get with him paired with Micah. But again, I'm certainly not deflecting blame from the Joneses, because they made the larger problem of instead of, I don't have a problem with the contract with Micah Parsons, but my solution to that is not to give not to give Osa the contract. It certainly isn't to trade Micah Parsons. So yeah, I think some of this stuff, it's like there's circumstance like that, right? Where and I think that there's some of that in the history of the Cowboys too, where they signed a player and then the scheme change happened and they don't fit the scheme change as well, and so there's just a lack of production versus what you signed the player for. So but for the most part, I say that there's the contracts that are bad with the Joneses, usually right away that they were bad. Like, you recognize as the trade for Kenneth Murray that we keep referencing, like, we were talking about how much that was a bad idea when it happened. Yeah. I think the problems that are concerning and problematic for us are the re-signings, right? The guys that you actually have a lot of insight on these guys, and yeah, like you said, like, that are B level guys that you are estimating as A- and giving them contracts that kind of reflect as such. I think the Osa situation may have some circumstance here, but it's a good example, right, of that kind of situation.
Yeah, and just to be fair, if you could change things, I wouldn't with Osa. I would want to keep him on that deal because it's really hard to find good defensive tackles. I think he's playing to that contract, but I think because they paid Osa, they were paying Trevon Diggs, they knew they wanted to pay Deron Bland, they felt like they couldn't spend $45 million a year on Micah Parsons, and that's how a trade like this ultimately happens. It's not smart, but I mean, I guess I kind of see the logic behind it, at least a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's death by 1,000 cuts, right? It's like when you make a mistake over here, it leaves you little margin for error over there, right? And I think that's where this is starting to catch up with the Cowboys a little bit, when they've taken some big swings and had some big contracts that have left some dead money that have caused some problems for them, and moving this money around a little bit, even though for the most part the salary cap is real.
Yeah, and we should give them some credit. Like the Dak one, they took forever to sign that one. They paid Dak probably not paid him more than he's worth, but they could have gotten this deal done sooner and paid him less. They did the same thing with CeeDee Lamb. Both those guys are having really good years. I mean, CeeDee Lamb's up to 94 yards a game. He's going to hit 1,000 yards here in week 16. Dak's going to probably lead the NFL in passing yards. He's been a borderline MVP candidate. So it's not like they've gotten every one of these
they're not being
wrong.
overpaid, right? Like it's not like you feel like those guys aren't earning it. The problem is that you could have gotten both of those guys cheaper, which would have provided you more opportunity to have some more flexibility in other spots.
Bingo. All right, let's talk about the Cowboys' future plans at running back. Does that include Javonte Williams? Should they draft a running back in round 1? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. And with FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. And live betting is the best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. And FanDuel lets you jump into the moment with live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly, player props that update as guys heat up. You can even bet on the next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and so much more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, and every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Our final question comes from Ron. He wants to know, what does the future look like at the Cowboys running back position? Do they bring back Javonte Williams? Are they in position to spend a round 1 pick at running back now that they've re-emphasized the run game? What do you think, Landon?
I think first we need to take a step back and examine what happened this year with the running back position, right? I think Javonte Williams was a resounding success. I think more than either of us could have expected. He took on the role of a bell cow and carried the load for the Cowboys throughout the season. I would be thrilled to re-sign him, and I think that the Cowboys should make efforts to try to re-sign him this year without a doubt. Having said that, like I do think that if having gone through all this, and if the Cowboys. And even during the Minnesota game, obviously I was having these thoughts specifically, right? And it's hard not to. If the Cowboys were still in the playoff situation, and there's a 2% chance or whatever it is that they are, I would be concerned about the running back situation going into the playoffs, because I do think that Javonte Williams has taken too many carries. He's getting beat up as we get later in the season. And this is a real problem that I feel like previous Cowboys offenses in the modern era have run into, right? Like DeMarco Murray, even back when he was having his great seasons with the Cowboys. I mean, he really tapered off at the end of the year when you really kind of needed him the most. So I do think that you find a way to re-sign Javonte Williams, but I also think that we need to have a conversation about not having him necessarily split the load, but having a more serious candidate as a secondary running back, but also a guy who could provide a change of pace for them, because I do think the Javonte Blue situation has basically been, a failure to launch.
I mean, Blue has been nothing. He's given them absolutely nothing this year. I don't mind that strategy. What makes that hard this year is there's not a lot of free agent running backs to fill that role of like the 8 to 10 touch guy that gives you the explosive plays, because teams just aren't letting that guy walk very often. And usually you could find that guy like in day 2 of the draft. I'm thinking of like Travion Henderson this year in New England. That's a guy that can create a bunch of big plays, but they have him paired with Ramondre Stevenson and it's working, right?
Yeah.
But the Cowboys don't have a 2nd or 3rd round pick, so it makes it a little bit more challenging. As for the 1st round running back talk, I just saw Jeremiah Love declared for the draft. There's going to be a million mock drafts. Prepare yourself over the next 4 months of linking Love to the Cowboys. I will say this. I'm going to concede this. I think of all the previous years, this is the first year where I think it would make more sense than in previous iterations of this team to go after that first round running back, because you fix the interior for your offensive line. You're running a more power-based scheme, and that's where a really talented running back can be a difference. Where I think if you're running a lot of wide zone, everything is pretty clear on how a running back should read it. But if you're running more like, man blocking stuff, it's really up to the running back to have the feel and the vision to make plays. And one of the things that the Cowboys just haven't gotten this year is a lot of explosive runs. And I'm talking like the 25, 30-yard runs. And I think they have been there, but Javonte's been so effective that it really hasn't been an issue at all.
I mean, I can't believe the words that are coming out of your mouth, to be honest. But listen, your reasons
I'm not advocating
are sound.
for that, by the way. I'm not saying they should do that. I'm just saying I could at least get behind it this year more so than in previous years where your offensive line was a mess and it got old really fast.
Absolutely. I think the reason you say it is sound, but I agree. Like, I think, but I want to go back to another point that we were bringing up is that I think that the kind of secondary running back that you've talked about, right? The problem is even more complex than that, where I think that those running backs have been elevated so much now that it's a cost issue, right? And I don't even just mean money. I mean, like in the resources to spend, because Travion Henderson was not a 3rd round pick, right? And like, and Jamar Gibbs was not a first. Yeah,
the Cowboys didn't even have a chance at Judkins or Henderson. They were both gone by the time they got to 44.
So the point being is that, the Cowboys have a position that is difficult to find and like is costly. And you have 2 first-round picks, but as we talked about earlier in the show, you had those kind of earmarked elsewhere. So how do you find that spot specifically at the running back position? I don't know. All I know is that I do feel like the Cowboys need that spot.
And one more thing before we go. I think Javonte is going to be very affordable. I think there's people projecting him to get like $6.5, $7 million a year. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't even get that. Those type of running backs, like guys that just aren't clearly top 15 running backs, they're kind of destined to be in this like 1 year, $5 million range, like we saw last year for Javonte.
Yeah.
But I also wouldn't be opposed to the Cowboys going out and finding a more explosive, younger running back that they feel like can maximize the offense. And there are a couple of names out there. We'll see if Breece Hall hits the market. It sounds like the Jets really want to keep him. But I'm looking at someone like Kenneth Walker in Seattle, he'll be going into year 5. He's been awesome this year, but he's been splitting snaps with Zach Charbonnet. He's had some durability stuff as well. But I do think that would be somebody who could be an upgrade as a runner that could give you maybe some more of those home run plays. Again, usually I'm not in favor of paying these guys, but we've been saying for a while now, Landon, like 2026, 2027. That is your window. And if that means pushing future cap into 2028 and beyond, I'm okay with that. Go try to win it right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a good strategy.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Check out the channel, download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Did we make your Spotify Wrapped? Let us know. Tag us on our national Locked On Podcast Network account, and we'll drop you a free code for the Everydayer Club. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.